All right, guys. Today I'm going to be presenting on why Lamar Jackson deserved the 2024 NFL MVP award. So, this presentation is a comparative analysis of the 2024 NFL Most Valuable Player race between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. So, some things to know before getting started, real quick, are going to be the MVP award is chosen by a panel of 50 voters each year. They rank players 1 through 5. First place gets 10 points, second place gets 5, and so on. Also know that the first team All-Pro award is chosen by the Associated Press each year. Basically, they choose the best player at every position. They choose a first team and a second team. And then just to have a reference, a breakdown of the voting real quick. Josh Allen received 27 first place votes, and Lamar Jackson finished with 23 first place votes. So this is one of the tightest MVP races ever. So I'm a lifelong football fan who watch each player's games during this season. I feel like I'm able to provide an unbiased opinion because I'm not a fan of either team, and nor am I a fan of either team's rivals. So first, we're going to do an analysis of their individual achievements, and this is why the statistics favor Lamar Jackson. So as you can see here, Lamar Jackson had about 400 more passing yards, 41 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So what jumps off the page to me at first glance is his number of passing touchdowns and interceptions. These are exceptional, and they're a lot higher than Josh Allen's. Next, looking at the advanced stats, Lamar Jackson had a lot higher passer rating, a little bit higher completion percentage, much higher total pass EPA, and then a much higher yards per attempt. So Lamar Jackson actually led the entire league in passer rating, EPA, and yards per attempt. And his passer rating of 119.6 was actually fourth all time in a season, which I'll touch on a little more later. So next, talking about his rushing upside, in a broader perspective, more than just this season in particular, Lamar Jackson is thought to be maybe the greatest dual threat quarterback of all time. Michael Vick set his quarterback rushing yards record in 13 games, and Lamar Jackson in the 2024 season actually broke that in just 7 seasons as a starter. At the heart of Lamar's rushing ability is his speed and elusiveness. And in 2024, he hit a career high speed of in game of 21 and a half miles per hour on a 48-yard run against the Houston Texans. And after the game, when he was asked about it, he said he was just jogging, which I think shows how crazy his speed is. And he's not only the fastest quarterback, but he's one of the fastest players in the whole league. So I argue that he actually had a better season on the ground and through the air, which looking at the stats, it's a bit of a gray area, but he had 400 more rushing yards. He did have 8 fewer touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. He had a lot higher yards per carry, and he did have a much lower rush EPA. So at first glance, Allen's advantage in rushing touchdowns and rush EPA definitely stand out, but I think these numbers are slightly misleading for related reasons, mostly due to the short yardage nature of Allen's rushing game. So rush EPA values more highly short yardage runs. Say, for example, a 2 yard run on 3rd and 1 is valued more highly than an 8 yard run on 2nd and 10. It also values more highly runs that are closer to the end zone, which, when you take into account Josh Allen's rushing touchdowns, it kind of explains why. Which leads me towards my next point about the big gap between the two, which is rushing touchdowns. So Josh Allen had 12, Lamar Jackson had 4, but the average length of Josh's rushing touchdowns was just 5.83 yards, which is extremely short. And I believe 6 out of 12 of those rushing touchdowns were from inside the 1 yard line. So Lamar, on a smaller sample size, he it was smaller, but he did have an average length of 19 yards on his rushing touchdowns, which is obviously a lot higher. Um, I think Josh Allen definitely is special as a rusher, but it's more, like I said, short yardage, it's more situational, and it's more scheme dependent. Whereas Lamar Jackson, he thrives in the open field, he creates on his own, and I think that's more valuable than just, a 1 or 2 yard run up the middle. When you consider these factors, along with Jackson's greater yard total and yards per carry, I think, in my opinion, it's fair to conclude they had a better, more efficient season as a rusher in addition to as a passer. So we're going to look at the historical precedent of past winners as well. So at its core, MVP is a quarterback award. Since 1990, only 8 non-quarterbacks have won the award. And outside of these non-quarterback winners, the last time the quarterback who was named first team All-Pro was not named as the MVP as well was in 1987. So almost 40 years ago when Joe Montana lost the race to John Elway. So given that Lamar Jackson was named first team All Pro but not MVP, that logic doesn't really add up much. It's just not something we've seen, in, like I said, almost 40 years, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. In addition, the only two quarterbacks to throw for 40 or more passing touchdowns and five or fewer interceptions in a season ever are Aaron Rodgers in 2020 and Lamar Jackson in 2024. And Aaron Rodgers won the MVP that season. To put it into perspective a little more, I think only seven quarterbacks ever have thrown for 40 or more passing touchdowns and 10 or fewer interceptions in a season. So the fact that Lamar Jackson threw for only four, in addition to throwing for 41 passing touchdowns, is absurd. And as I touched on earlier, Lamar's 2024 passer rating of 119.6 puts him fourth place all time in a season. The three seasons ahead of him, I believe, were Aaron Rodgers twice and Peyton Manning once, and all three of these seasons were awarded the MVP trophy. So once again, when a player is playing at this level, I think they should receive the rightful praise and accolades that coincide with being in this company of these elite historical legend quarterbacks. So why the voters actually chose Josh Allen? Um, Many voters and fans just cited Josh Allen's weaker roster as reasoning for him. They say, he did more with less, and because of this, created more value than Lamar Jackson. But I argue that this logic is just flawed to the core. The MVP award is not a comparison of who did more with less. It's just a competition of who did more. And when you look at all the statistics and game film and everything, I think Lamar Jackson did more than almost any quarterback in league history. Um, Kind of on a similar note, another thing they claim is that Josh Allen raised his team's ceiling more than Lamar Jackson did. Some say that the Ravens roster would have been fine without Lamar, and even I was seeing people at the time say they still would have made the playoffs without him. And well, I think that this argument is more based in opinion rather than fact. I still completely disagree that they would have been a good team without him. Since he took over as their starting quarterback in 2019, he's missed 17 games, and they've had a record of 6 and 11 in these games. And to put that into perspective a little more, that would be, I think, eighth worst record in the NFL this last season, which is pretty bad. Um, Another another problem with why he was chosen was voter fatigue. In sports discourse, the concept of voter fatigue is a very real thing. Essentially, when a guy's dominating the sport for years on end, fans, critics, voters, media, they all get tired of seeing the same guy win. It's just human nature. And voters in particular, they want to vote for a different guy. They want to see a different guy on top. And I think that this concept applies greatly to his 2024 season. Um, Former NFL quarterback and now broadcaster for CBS, Tony Romo, spoke on this a bit during the season. He said that he does not have a vote, to be clear, but he said that he believed both players were even in his mind, but he personally would side with would side with Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson simply because Lamar already had two MVP trophies. And I think that this quote pretty much sums up the concept of voter fatigue. So some closing thoughts. Well, I think incredibly, incredibly highly of Josh Allen as a player, and I concur that he had an amazing 2024 season. It's going to be impossible for me to look back and wonder how the voters managed to get it this wrong this time. Um, like I said, whether it's due to voter fatigue or the flawed roster comparison I mentioned previously, I think Lamar Jackson's already legendary career will always be at least one accolade short of what he deserves. And that's all I have. Thank you guys for listening. Um, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I changed your mind a little bit if you disagreed before.